Hey everybody, I'm Mark Douglas from the Key of Awesome. Today I'm hanging out with Rick Savage and Joe Elliott from the legendary Def Leppard. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Good to be here.
This is awesome to be here. This is about as close as I'll ever get to being a rock star.
Well, you're on the drum riser.
I'm on the drum riser, so most people don't make it that far.
Yeah. Just don't fall off like we sometimes do.
So you guys really do plan to rock till you drop?
Well, we're still on the...
I thought that was just a party song. It seems to be kind of a mission statement for you guys.
Yeah, it has become a mission
And you two have been... You two
we
were
there right at the beginning,
original members.
Yeah, absolutely. August, September 77.
Wow, that's amazing. So you guys are doing the Rock of Ages tour this summer.
Yep.
And your songs are going to be featured in the film Rock of Ages with Tom Cruise. I heard that he was recently singing those, and you guys were kind of peeking over his shoulder watching him rehearse.
Yeah, we were really lucky at it was a year ago now, last summer when they were filming the movie. We started our tour in West Palm Beach in Florida, and the next day was a day off for us, and so it was a leisurely drive to Atlanta or somewhere. And we just got word that they were shooting the film in Fort Lauderdale, which was about a 20-minute drive. Did we want to come down and check it out? And coincidences don't get much better than this, but we walk into this club and there's Tom on stage doing Pour Some Sugar on Me.
Oh my God.
They spent like an hour doing different takes from different angles. But
did he freak out when you guys walked in?
No. I think we were ones freaking out. Yeah. It's like, is this really happening? It's like, slap me, is this a dream? You don't get somebody of Tom Cruise's quality and his stardom every day doing one of your songs, So it was a lot of fun to actually watch him do it.
Well, I was thinking, there's a little bit of symmetry to that. He kind of came on the scene right around the same time as you guys. Risky Business came out in '83.
Yeah.
83 was not too shabby of a year for you guys.
It was a good year for us, yeah.
And him, we remember well the socks only sliding on the wood to the Bob Seger song.
Yeah, and now he's doing it to Pour Some Sugar on Me.
And it's like, he's taking it to another level.
And by the way, he was really good. I mean, he was,
he was actually singing, he wasn't lip-syncing.
And his voice sounded amazing, absolutely amazing.
That guy always pulls it off, He's one of those guys you want to hate, but he always
works
pulls it
too
off.
hard to hate. You don't get given anything. He works very, very hard getting into character. And we were stood talking to him for an hour or so, and you could be really studying him, going, okay, obviously the tats are fake, but my God, they look real. And he's in great shape, and he's either grown his hair to real rock star lengths, or he's wearing a great wig. Either or, he pulls it off. He actually became Stacey Jacks. He was like proper rock star.
Well, that's amazing. You guys, I remember there was a little bit of trepidation about them using your songs. Was that with I remember I went and saw the show and they didn't actually have your songs in there.
They slagged us off in the
Oh, they did?
They do, yeah. I mean, it's part of the intro.
So they had to get Tom.
They have this thing and Def Leppard wouldn't let us use their songs. And it's all narrated by David Coverdale.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
David says, when he got the job to do it, he says, I'm about to slag you off. I said, go ahead, man, do what you want.
So they had to get Tom Cruise to convince you to use their
well, you make decisions and you live and die by them, and I mean, we'd be the first to say that not every decision we've ever made has been like necessarily a smart one, but you also are sometimes given a second chance, or you are a time to adjust your theories and your thoughts.
They're two separate entities, really. There is a movie, and there's the Broadway musical.
It started off as this tiny little stage show with nobody that we knew in it, and we're going, well, we've had hundreds of offers like that before and always turned them down, and it's always been a good idea to turn them down.
Yeah.
So, of course, we were just going along with what our current way of thinking was. But then when it took off, and people were saying, why aren't you in it? So we turned it down. We decided not to. And then when they said, they're going to make a film, and they, please, we want your songs. I mean, for God's sake, the film is actually named after one of your songs. And, oh, by the way, you're looking at people like Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Alec Baldwin and Tom Cruise and people like that were going, oh, hang on a minute, this is now somebody's moved the goalposts. So we had a rethink and we thought,
well, it's funny because I remember thinking, how are they able to actually use Rock of Ages? I thought you guys made that up. I didn't realize that was a hymn.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
a really interesting
There's
story
100 songs called Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
In fact, the band, Robbie Robertson's group, the band had a song called Rock of Ages. Which I found out long after the event, but I think I was about 8 when he wrote it. But not any kind of music I would normally listen to. But it is based on ours. They did take the song from us, but I think the biblical connection just gives it that like top of the mountain effect.
I've always wanted to ask you guys, what does unten, glieten, laufen, roven mean?
You better ask Mutt Lang.
He's the one that made it up.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good impression, actually. It's probably one of
I worked on it a
It's
little
one of the
bit.
better ones.
I remember when I
I'll
was a
give
kid
you that.
thinking, did they get the Swedish chef to from the Muppets
you know,
to count this off?
It was purely just a count because when we started recording the song, there was a long stretches where the song stays in the same key. It doesn't change chord at all. So just to let us know where we were in the song, there was various counts to where the chord changes were coming up.
Oh, okay.
Because obviously it was recorded before any vocals were recorded.
Or written.
Or written, yeah. And it was a cue for the guitar players to, okay, this is where we change chord. Otherwise we wouldn't know where we were. And there were many more of them.
Do you remember any of those?
Chipati Popadom, something else.
It was literally something that Mutt Lang did just on the spur of the moment.
Which, by the
amazing.
way, it was like cabin fever time for us. We've been recording for a long
we
time.
were going crazy anyway.
And we were just having a laugh, you know. It was one of the moments where too much coffee had been taken or something, and we just kind of lost the plot. But it just became an in-joke within the band, and we just, every time this thing went past, we just crack up laughing. And eventually, we lifted it from the middle of the song and just
And
glued
just
it
made
onto
it the
front.
count off, and then had a druid sort of doing it in the video, which made me think
Our
it
old
was
manager did that.
some kind of evil thing when I was a kid. I was like, what the hell does this
That was
mean?
again, you know. Sometimes we'll distance ourselves from some of the creative ideas. It was just an idea from David Mallet, the video director. He likes specific trademark things in his videos, and that was kind of one of them.
Well, speaking of druids, my all-time favorite.
Are you
comedy-
speaking of druids? We never mentioned that.
my all-time favorite comedy movie is Spinal Tap, and you guys have said before, you guys have actually compared yourself to Spinal Tap before.
Well, you might as well do it before the critics do. And then
Yeah.
you've got one in on them.
Have there been any great Spinal Tap moments, or do you know that there
Too
are
many to
happening,
mention.
like recently?
That is why the Spinal Tap movie is so good, because they nailed it. I mean, they did get the funny parts, but it actually does happen. And that's what makes it great. Just about every one of those things has happened to one of us or all of us
Right.
in the last 30 years. You know,
Well, I have
falling off
a-
stage, you name it. We've
yeah.
done it. You know.
I was at the premiere of the film in 1982
Oh,
in
yeah.
London, and I was sat behind some very trendy folk, people like Tom Dolby and the Thompson twins and all this sort of people that weren't.
Tom Waits.
Tom Waits actually made a quote about
Right.
it later on.
Yeah.
But every time something mad had happened, all the kind of guys with the big shoulder pads and the hairspray, the kind of flock of seagulls looking guys, and turn around to us and go, because it's like it never happened to them. And then as the years went on and the film became part of rock and roll folklore,
Right.
all the people that weren't as rock and roll as portrayed by Spinal Tap, as in like metal or hard rock, all started dropping admissions into interviews that Spinal Tap pretty much covered their life as well.
It happens to all kinds of
And
bands.
we stopped worrying about it when I read an interview with Tom Waits, and he said he couldn't watch the film anymore because it's too close to his life.
Yeah, was it actually funny to you at the time, or was it?
No,
kind of
I
just
thought it
like,
was
oh
hilarious.
god.
No, it was totally funny. I mean,
Yeah.
you just can't help but laugh
I
at
introduced
something
that
like
movie to hundreds of people. When we were living in Ireland, Adam Clayton from U2 came round to my house and we watched it together. And we were, he was like going, that's me.
Yeah.
I've been in the pod that got stuck,
Yeah, they did have a pod that one year with
They
their
had the lemon as well,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
never
and I
opened,
think somebody did
you
get
know.
stuck in that. Well, yeah, I was recently I did a show this summer at the Hard Rock in Cleveland, of all places, and it really was hard to find the stages because there's like 5 different stages. So there was definitely a moment where if they didn't have the arrows on the ground, you
Well,
could
with
really
without
conceivably-
the arrows, none of us would make it to the stage on time.
Yeah. Now you guys have worked with a lot of different musicians outside of your band. If you had to pick one, who would you say is the most talented musician you've ever worked with, Def Leppard excluded?
we probably all give different answers, really. I mean, one of my all-time idols is Brian May from Queen. And
Right.
just to share a stage with him was just like, it doesn't get any better than this.
And he was
from
a fan,
my point of view.
and he
you know.
was a fan of your guys
Well,
pretty early on.
He's always liked that type of music anyway, so that kind of follows. But we have been fortunate to come into contact with some fabulous musicians from all across the board, really.
Which is interesting because you guys have been kind of victims of snobbery from critics, and it seems like there's a lot more snobbery with critics than there are actual musicians, people that actually play this stuff. And it just seems kind of interesting. Like, are the English critics more snobby than the American critics, or?
Well, it depends. I think it goes in circles. Sometimes you can get snobby with humour. Like
Right.
you read the readings of Lester Bangs and people like that. Some of
Right.
it, depending on who he's talking about, you're like, absolutely, I completely agree with everything he's saying.
Right,
and
right,
there's
right.
other people who write about it, so that's an unfair criticism. Criticism with with just a dagger up your ass, basically, is not really fair. Criticism is like, I see what you're trying to do, but in my eyes, it didn't work. Everybody can take that. It's not. We're not shy and scared of criticism. What we've always been kind of annoyed about is people that just have a blanket hatred for you before they've even heard a word you've said because of the way you look or the titles of your songs or whatever. They don't give you a chance. And I guess we're all guilty of that in one way or another, but with critics, they, like us, are supposed to rise above. And I find that half of them actually just stay in the gutter. And that's why there's always going to be love and hate between bands and critics.
At the end of the day, we've never written a song for a critic or with a critic in mind. We write it for the fan and for as many people would as possibly be attracted to it. Without we don't even think down those lines. And at the end of the day, the people that buy records aren't the critics. So.
Well, I mean, we grew up with the classic example is Queen. They I've never seen a band get so much criticism. I mean,
And Led Zeppelin, when Led Zeppelin was actually,
criticism, and yet they'd be getting these reviews that were just like scorching. They were like,
vindictive to a point.
Yeah, and then you'd see the turn over the page the next day. It's like playing some 100,000-seater stadium in England. It's sold out, scribbled across it. Well, obviously the kids don't care.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when the whole grunge thing happened, and the funny thing about that is I don't really actually remember that affecting you guys that much. You guys had hits right alongside
it didn't affect us
Nirvana.
initially. I mean, we ran parallel with it. In '92 when we released Adrenalize, right in the middle of all that going off.
Yeah, Let's
It
Get
went
Rocked
number
was
one for
huge,
5
like the
weeks.
summer of '92. I remember.
The album kept Springsteen off the top for 5 or 6 weeks. It was still, to this day, still one of the longest albums at number one in the 90s. There were only about 7 or 8 that actually stayed at number one longer than ours. So it was only towards the late night, well, I'd say mid, 96, 97 is where it probably hurt us the most. But, we came through, it's turbulent, but we came through the other side. And by 99, a lot of the grunge bands had died away. I mean, Kurt Cobain had been dead by 5 years by then.
Yeah, that whole thing seemed to only last about 5 years, really, and a lot of the stuff that people...
They have an image to keep up with their own audience. They can't admit to liking some of the 80s bands because it doesn't bode well with their own audience. But then 10 years down the road, you bump into them, you meet them, and all of a sudden it's like, actually, you guys are all right. We didn't dislike you guys. You guys are okay. And you hear that from Jerry Cantrell and stuff. And I just did this little tour of South America with Mike Innes, the bass player from Alice in Chains, playing his parts on 2 of our songs. So it's like, there's a facade that sometimes is there for whether record companies tell them to keep it up, whether their own ego does, or their youth, or their lack of confidence to just be able to say, look, I don't care. I like the Osmonds and I like the Partridge Family as well as Black Sabbath. What are you going to do about it? I tip my hat to anybody that can stand up and say, I love everything, and mean it, because it's like, well, I only listen to one kind of music.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing I've noticed. Most people that I know have varied tastes and are able to listen to Metallica and then maybe not Barry Manilow, but most people
he has
that
his moments.
yeah, but most people are able to kind of do that. But for some reason, in your genre or the genre of metal that you're kind of associated with, sometimes to your chagrin, there tends to be some snobbery within that community, especially when you guys first started off and people just wanted you to be this thing.
It's a very specific style of music, metal, and that's why we're sometimes a little bit uncomfortable by being part of that. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with it, but we are a little bit more wider in what we've always done or tried to do. Yes, part of what we do is a part of, in the metal thing, but it's also in the pop thing as well. And we've always tried to, not that consciously, but whatever we've done has had a little bit of more than just one category of music, really.
Well, some of your best songs feel like about 5 songs in one. I mean, the chorus to Photograph, the actual chorus to Photograph is like a gorgeous, like it's very pretty, which makes, when it gets heavy again.
In isolation, yeah.
Yeah, but-
if you take it as that.
And I think
but
that's
what makes it work to us.
And I think that's what a lot of bands miss, is that when you have such a like nice, gorgeous part here, when you get back to rockin', the rockin's gonna really punch through. You know,
Dynamics.
a lot of your
that's what we've always
songs.
tried to do, is put dynamics into the song.
And the thing about metal as well, and you know, we used to get criticised by a lot of metal bands, and in fairness, rightfully so, say they're not a heavy metal band, and we'd be like, yeah, I know.
We agree.
Hallelujah.
We know we're not.
Thanks. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, but a lot of it was down to the fact that it's like they hated us because 98% of our audience were girls. And they were playing in front of guys with big hairy moustaches and bald heads and tattoos and torn clothes. And we were playing in front of all these lovely chicks, and there was a bit of jealousy.
And we
there.
were selling records to a certain amount of metal people,
Mm-hmm.
but also a hell of a lot of pop people as well.
Right.
So, and you know, and we actually broke the mold a little bit from that type
If you
of
got
thing.
2 albums in your career that have been fighting Michael Jackson for the top spot for 6 or 7 months,
You're doing something right.
you're not. You're really not fighting a heavy metal battle.
Right,
you know what I
right,
mean?
exactly.
It wasn't Dio or Anthrax. We were, you know, who, in fairness, when they sell really well, and you know, all due respect to both those artists because they're very good at what they do, or were. It's a smaller. They're never going to be in that era where they can say, well, we're challenging Michael Jackson, you know, blow by blow on sales and stuff.
Right.
That's why our stuff always had a broader appeal, which basically, by virtue of that alone, takes it out of metal. It takes it into a much broader just rock. You know, we never saw AC/DC as a metal band. We never saw Queen or Van Halen as metal bands. They just had more in their armory. They could do vaudeville. They could do comedy. You know, I mean, David Lee Roth was like a comedian.
Dude,
You know, and
totally.
whereas a lot of metal is deadly serious and it's all about Dungeons and Dragons and slaying this, that, the other, and just like, we couldn't go there lyrically. This wasn't our thing. We were weaned on the classics.
Yeah.
Beatles, Stones, Kinks, Who, Zeppelin, you know, that kind of stuff. All the great British bands that basically sung about real things like relationships, girls, boys, whatever, you know.
Drinking.
Rock, drinking.
Having a good time.
Yeah, life, you know, not like just walking into a cave where there's 10 dragons that need slaying. It's like, no, I can't go there.
I mean, yeah, all the great bands that seem to really cross over when they do. I mean, Metallica eventually got a lot of flack too, but you know, I feel like the guys that last
I
the
don't get
longest
that. I'm
end up
sorry, but
getting a
when
lot
they
of flack.
did, I remember when Nothing Else Matters came out, and there was just hell from Metallica fans going, "Oh my God, they've turned into a Neil Diamond." It's like,
Right.
this is the best thing they've ever done.
Yeah.
He's actually singing his ass off.
Yeah, and the
And
other
then
thing
but
was they had done
they
stuff
wanted
like that
more,
before.
and I'm like
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
"This is great, you know, let him be."
And it ended up selling millions and millions
Yeah.
of copies, by the way. So
And-
they were doing something right.
Well, to me, if you were really paying attention as a Metallica fan, you'd know that Nothing Else Matters just sounded like the beginning of one of their 10-minute songs that turned into like,
Sure.
you know, they just never went to that.
But he
part.
sang. He sang.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a huge difference between the early Soundgarden albums and Chris Cornell when he did things like Black Hole Sun.
Right.
All of a sudden, some producer said, "Look, stop the shouting, sing," you know.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, his tone and the quality of his performance was way more listenable.
Are you guys I know you guys talk a lot about being fans of Queen. You're in a Mappa Hoople cover band. You know, a lot of those 70s bands, were there any bands that influenced you along the way? You know, some of your peers or even some people now like Arcade Fire or Muse. Do you get into any of the newer stuff? Or
I'd say Muse for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was 14, I just wanted to be in a band that played loud guitars and great harmonic vocals,
Yeah.
which is why I gravitated to Queen just like that. To me, what Muse are doing a lot of the time, no, I mean, you know, they're not a Queen rip-off, but they've got their own.
they've
identity.
got some Queen in there.
Well,
yeah.
it's not even a Queen thing. It's just that they've got great guitars, they've got great melodies, and some of their harmonies are just cool, all in the same package. So, you know, they're a good example of a modern day band that I would automatically go, yeah, they're cool for me.
And he's not afraid. Bellamy's not afraid to sing in the falsettos that Fred did, which takes it out of the realm of rock because you can't sing in falsetto. It's a bit gay sounding, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
It's
like
just that attitude.
it's supposed to be all like come on, you know. You mentioned Arcade Fire. I think that the album Suburbs, the Suburbs album, is a brilliant record. And, you know, I could totally understand why somebody like David Bowie wants to get up and jam with him all the time when he comes to New York.
Right.
Because you can hear that Bowie thing. They've got the chords that remind me of Ziggy and Aladdin Sane. And I've always been a fan of bands that they don't have to be that great at their instruments, as long as the cacophony and noise that comes out the other end, that's gone through the mincer, is unique, and it has a quality to it that's like takes you. It's like, well, he's not the best singer and he's not the best guitarist, but it sounds
something
sounds
special
good.
about it.
It becomes unique, and unique in this day and age is the best ingredient you can put in, because you can take 1,000 musicians and stick them on a drum kit. It's going to sound like a drum kit. But it's as you add the things to it, you put the bass player in now, you can Jaco Pastorius or Sid Vicious. All of a sudden then you've got two dynamics where it's going to go one way or other depending on where the guitars come in. And then you sing over the top, you can have something that sounds as perfect as Supertramp, or you can have something that sounds as chaotic as the New York Dolls. Depending on what floats your boat. And they can both work, and they both do work. It just depends on what the listener wants.
Were you guys into the punk thing at all?
We were right in the middle of it when it happened. We could see the benefits of it. You know, I was a huge fan. Collectively, we were aware of it, and I wouldn't say Sav was the biggest fan of it.
Well, Phil's in a band with Paul Cook now.
Sure, I mean, for the
So you must like him a little bit.
first 18 months, I actually hated it, did not understand it, because I was like, you know what, I've been like practicing and learning to play guitar for 5 years, and I've still got a long, long way to go. And yet, these cats come in on, they only know 3 chords and they can't play them very well. I did not get it. Then after about 2 years, the penny dropped and I went, you know what, I've got to take this stick off my arse and throw it out, because there's a lot of good stuff coming out. And, you know, the influences that the great punk bands had are still around today.
And we did take it on board. I mean, other than having played Pretty Vacant on stage a bunch of times when we were kids, we would listen to these songs and go, you know what's really refreshing about these songs is the guitar solo is 10 seconds long, not 10 minutes.
Right.
And, you know, when we did our first album, songs like Wasted, we chopped everything down into short sections, and that was based on that. It was the energy that punk brought into the music. It did need a good kick up the backside. They weren't the best musicians, and a lot of bands, in fairness, got dragged into punk, were actually better than punk, but they used the punk as a kind of as a springboard to become a new wave band, and you ended up with a lot of what in Britain we call them pub rock, and there were bands like Eddie and the Hot Rods and Brinsley Schwartz and Dux Deluxe and Dr. Feelgood, who were essentially R&B bands. But I mean, I don't mean R&B as in Alicia Keys. I mean R&B as in like proper rock and roll bands like Johnny Kidd and the Pirates and stuff like that. And there was a difficult period. There's a bit of time where you couldn't really tell them apart. You go, oh, they're a punk band. But you listen to Eddie and the Hot Rods, and they could play way too well to be a punk band. They just didn't want to sound like Uriah Heep. They didn't want to get all bloated up and have an organ. They just played real quick, you know, grinding guitars, but they were actually good musicians. Then you had a band like The Clash, who actually couldn't play at all, but they came up with such unique songs when they started mixing reggae and old R&B and the glam that Mick Jones brought to the table, and then the soul that the drummer did, because he played in bands that opened for the Temptations and stuff.
He kind of held
They
it all
had a
together.
blend that, whether you liked it or not, it was unique, and that was their big selling point.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a lot of the punk bands that did last started to branch out a little bit and didn't just stay.
Well, you have to.
with the,
I mean, that's the whole point. You know, I mean, even with the Police came out of that and just went on to something bigger. And the Clash, you know, it's like anything. The great bands that were there at the beginning of a movement, for want of a better phrase, they're kind of still around now. If they possibly could be. You know, nobody's died or anything like that. They still exist, and that's possibly the biggest true test.
I think the Clash survived the start of punk by changing, and the Sex Pistols didn't, but they garnished their legend by just making this one brilliant record, and it's like, well, you know, you could probably never made a better one than that anyway, so what a great way to go out, which was the whole ethos of punk.
They sort of perfected it with that one
antithesis of
album
rock.
and then said, okay.
You know. And they come back every 10 years to pay their mortgages off, which is fine.
I think we got to wrap it up here, but I just wanted to just say good luck on the tour, and you guys, it's sounding great, and I'm just really happy to work with you. It's been,
pleasure.
You know,
Our pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you.
Nice one.
nice to meet you. Def Leppard.